HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents the Stimulati Experience, 9 skills for getting past pain, setbacks, and trauma to ignite health and happiness. By Jim Curtis. Foreword by Gabrielle Bernstein. Read by Roger Wayne. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Robert Frost. Foreword. I've been a full-time student and teacher of spirituality and personal growth for 12 years. One beautiful benefit of having such a consistent spiritual practice is that I've shifted the way I think about, recognize, and deal with something that often keeps us in a headlock: fear. Now, fear can be pretty straightforward and helpful. For example, it helps to keep us from doing reckless things like darting into the street. But there's a whole other kind of fear that's very layered and lives deep within our psyche. It's a belief system formed from stories of our past. We've held on to these fearful beliefs for decades, and we project them onto the present and the future. Recognizing and releasing fear is something I do daily. As a student and teacher of the metaphysical text, A Course in Miracles, I know that when I catch myself detouring into fear, I can choose again. And I do it every single day. I'm in no way immune to fear. I've talked about my fears in my books, on both my blog and YouTube channel, and even on national TV with Oprah and Dr. Oz. In the past 12 years, I've learned something really powerful about myself, and I strongly feel that it will resonate with you too. I believe that on some level, we're addicted to our fears. We don't really want to live without them. I've also learned that if we want to find true freedom and happiness, we have to release our resistance to these fears. Refusing to acknowledge fear only gives it more power. Freedom from fear becomes available to us when we accept that fear is normal and that we're not weak or weird for feeling it. When you recognize your fears, you can look at them from a place of love. My friend Jim Curtis calls this more positive, loving relationship with fear creating vulnerability, and I was thrilled to read about this idea in the beautiful book you're holding in your hands right now. In many ways, Jim and I have traveled the same path. We have both experienced major struggles and overcome despair by finding our authentic selves. The work he has done with his Stimulati, the people and places that have influenced him, which he shares on these pages, reminds me of my relationship with John of God. In fact, it's because of John of God that Jim and I met. Jim and I share a very dear friend, Jenny. Jenny would talk to me about Jim all the time, and I felt like I was getting to know him, even though we'd never met. Jenny's stories about Jim were always in the context of the wonderful, loving, fearless experiences he would take on in his quest to find his authentic self. Of course, the universe has a way of bringing together people who need to meet, and it did just that. John of God, an extraordinary and world-renowned spiritual healer, was holding a healing session for hundreds of people at the Omega Center in Rhinebeck, New York. It was incredibly peaceful. Everyone there was dressed in pure white, meeting each other and working in solitude, meditating and feeling his spiritual healing power. As we wrapped up a meditation session on the first day of the retreat, I saw a man walking toward me on the green. He was moving with a little difficulty, but at the same time he was glowing beautifully in white. When he came up to me, he said, "We have a mutual friend, Jenny." And right then I knew it was Jim. We experienced John of God together and talked about his ability to bring people together in kindness and health. I sensed Jim's openness and desire to authentically connect with others. It is truly his purpose. And I realized that we share a mission: to help people discover their authentic selves, to enlighten, and to create more love and kindness in the world. After dealing with traumas in our lives, Jim and I both surrendered our need to control and our desire to escape, and we chose to align with love. This book is an authentic reflection of Jim's journey. Within these pages, he gets vulnerable and honest, sharing the wisdom he's gained. Trust that you've been led to this book for a reason. No matter what you're facing, whether it's a health challenge or your ability to feel happy, the lessons and exercises in this book will help you look at fear from a place of love and discover your unique purpose. And living a life of purpose is one of the most powerful ways to reclaim your health. Gabrielle Bernstein. Introduction. I agreed to give it a try. The peripherally inserted central catheter, or PICC line, had to be surgically implanted. A strong tube, a couple of feet long, was inserted through a vein in my arm. It ran up through my bicep and shoulder and stopped at the top of my heart. It delivered a high dosage of seriously strong drugs you should not be on for a long period of time. Luckily for me, the treatments made a significant difference. I felt better for the first time in years. Meanwhile, I was still out partying and generally behaving like a maniac until I finally pushed it too far and broke the PICC line in a barroom brawl. I was in a seedy New York City dive bar when the tube ruptured. As soon as I realized what had happened, my doctor's warnings about the risks and care of the line immediately echoed in my head. Infection, aneurysm, death, responsibility. In the dim light of the dive bar bathroom, I tried to assess the damage, and I realized there was a significant amount of blood in the line and trickling down my forearm. Not knowing what to do, I called my mother, and she said quite matter-of-factly, "Pull it out!" Ever since the onset of my illness, I had worked up a strong aversion to needles and all things that could be inserted into the veins of my body. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and thought, can I actually do this? I had a feeling of being outside myself as I pulled out almost 2 feet of tubing. I felt things get dark and I almost passed out. It didn't slide out easily. There were some tugs along the way. But I did it. You never know what you're capable of until you do something. That was 21 years ago, but that moment was neither the start nor the end of my story. 2 nights ago, my family celebrated Thanksgiving together at my sister's home in New York City. My parents are now elderly, but still, for the most part, with it. My son, almost 9, to our astonishment, ate turkey. My 4 nieces and nephews, all 18 and older, were like puppies, huddled up talking about their newest love interests. To my disbelief, my sister and I have become the middle-aged adults in the room. This past year has not been easy for my family. We've all had our ups and downs, but what particularly marks this holiday is that my sister's baby, the youngest son, has come back home from over a year of therapeutic schooling in Montana for anxiety and what they call dangerous coping mechanisms. He now has the insight of a guru. He has not only done the work, but also accepted his experience and used it to change his story. He is at ease, confident, and calm, and he was the first person to ask me why I am writing this book. I have answered the question, "So what is this book about?" many times, but why was new. I answered him with some bullshit about the power of mindset and how I felt compelled to get the word out. True enough, but my answer stuck with me, because it just didn't feel authentic. I have been consumed by his question since, and it is not until this moment, sitting in the back of an Uber watching the blur of trees go by, that I get real with why I am writing. The truth is, I am writing this book because I want my suffering to mean something. I want to believe it was all for a higher purpose. I know pain well. I have experienced life with a hopelessness that even another oxycodone or Vicodin couldn't fix. I have been intimate with despair and have lived in the darkness of guilt and shame that surrounds illness. I have felt my body crumble under the fight for mental, physical, and spiritual health as my muscles, energy, strength, and self-worth withered away. I understand forgetting what good or normal feels like. I have been comforted by denial and have made up justifications and told stories built around lies for survival. I've experienced the crush of heartbreak, the loss of close relationships, and the confusion of wondering, who am I? And what should I do now? For much of my life, I let my stories, specifically the ones around my illness and sense of self, define and create my reality. When I finally got clear after practicing the lessons of the Stimulati, I could see what I was creating and chose to create a new story. Then my life changed dramatically for the better. My Stimulati experiences were the turning points in my life. The skills I learned from integrating the work of the world's leading thought igniters and healers gave me a new mindset that I then made real by the stronger, better, bolder story I chose to live. The mindset is about being bold enough to examine your present reality. Caution, this might sting a bit. And not the oftentimes limited stories we tell ourselves and others that are based in fear and inadequacy. Shit, I could have put those two emotions in the first paragraph because they've been like welcome family members to me. Happily, they are like estranged second cousins now. I became strong enough to accept the truth, which led me to feel better than ever before. The experiences in this book will teach you to dump your fear. Seriously. Get a no-fear bumper sticker or tattoo if you need a reminder. There is a better way to live, and in these pages I will tell you my own story and the stories of some truly amazing people like you, as well as show you exactly how to do it. If you are listening to this book, you are someone who has had enough and is looking for a change. You might have just received news about your health or the health of a loved one. You may have had a terrible experience where you feel loss or rejection, either from a divorce, a death of someone close, job issues, or another event that has put a cold, wet blanket around your shoulders. You may be caring for yourself or someone else. But as you start reading, I ask you to consider this. By your human nature, you are a fighter, even if you are scared, depressed, or anxious. In you, there is a will to live better. I'm here to tell you that a stronger, bolder, happier, and healthier life is not only possible, but also just a few choices away. You may be skeptical that any single book will actually help you. Is this just the same self-help program from another self-proclaimed guru who will tell you how to unleash your unlimited power? Or will it end up focusing on quantum physics and the power to heal yourself with the energy of the universe? Okay, I confess, I believe both. You have the potential to be and do most anything you set your mind to, and quantum physics is too cool to be ignored. However, I am no guru. I am like you. But I have spent the past 20 years studying how to fight illness and optimize mindset. I understand that the constant physical and emotional feelings of sickness, depression, and pain are real. I don't deny your struggle. And I know that a quick self-help placebo is a short-lived respite. I also know that often you've made decisions about what you can and cannot do before you are even aware you have made them. 95% of our decisions are made in our unconscious mind. I'm here to show you that being amazingly better, doing whatever you want to do, and being more fulfilled in life can be your reality. You may have heard or read stories of miraculous recoveries, or of people who, despite their serious, debilitating conditions, are able to do the improbable, survive the impossible, and achieve the unachievable. What makes these people succeed when others can't leave their house? This book sets out to identify the clear catalysts for disruptive, life-altering change. I have been on a quest to answer this question. I've learned from my work with the world's leading medical and spiritual experts that these people are not outliers. With the right tools, guidance, and awareness, anyone who is struggling with emotional, spiritual, and physical health can have similar outcomes. Today, I'm one of these miracle stories, and soon you will be one of them too. Together, we can disrupt the struggle and the illness mindset. So it goes. My awareness of what is possible did not come easily. Oh, let me tell you. I am no angel. I have made questionable life choices, to put it lightly. My journey, like everyone else's, began with my parents. I was a miracle baby or a mistake, depending on how you frame it. My mother, an emergency room nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, was told that she couldn't hold a pregnancy after my older sister was born. My parents then decided to adopt and brought my second sister into the family. 6 years later, my parents, then in their mid-40s, got pregnant with yours truly. When I was a child, there was always something frightening to me about my health. My parents told me stories of how, as a newborn, I had trouble breathing and was not released from the hospital for some time. Once I was at home, my parents would sit with me each night, one hand on my stomach, praying the worst didn't happen. By the time I was 8 years old, I had a growth in my throat that prohibited me from breathing again, which required surgery to remove. Was this karma? Years later, I was regressed into a past life by Dr. Brian Weiss, the author of Many Lives, Many Masters, and appeared on The Maury Povich Show, back when Maury wasn't focused on breaking up fights between estranged lovers. Maury and the good doc seemed to believe these health issues were from past lives or possibly trauma from my parents' arguments while still in the womb. While this could be true, soon I will show you why it doesn't matter. Despite these issues, I became confident and strong. I grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts, an urban neighborhood filled with all sorts of characters and access to plenty of no good. To be more specific, guns, drugs, alcohol, and fighting. My saving grace was the pool. I swam competitively through high school, became nationally ranked, and was recruited to swim at the University of New Hampshire. When I got older, my mother was never one to get nervous or stressed when I got sick or injured, which happened with some regularity. My athletics, schoolwork, and strict father never seemed to get in the way of my attraction to trouble, and I had my fair share of ER visits. I remember a time as a teenager, eager to escape the house, I was thoughtlessly running and smashed my face through the glass storm door. There was blood everywhere. My mom calmly got me into the car, drove me to the hospital, and over the shoulder of the attending physician made it clear how she wanted the stitches, so as not to leave a scar on her baby's pretty face. During the summer of 1995, amid a period of heroic drinking, drugging, and Grateful Dead shows, my life changed forever. I was 19 and living on Cape Cod for the summer. One afternoon I awoke to my typical hangover, pulled myself out of bed, and lumbered into the bathroom to shower. As I leaned against the tile wall, the hot water beat down over me. I remained still, waiting for my head to clear. But I noticed something was different. It was my left foot. I raised it closer to the hot water, but still something was wrong. There was no sensation. I could not feel the heat of the water or the water itself. My stomach dropped. After some attempts to massage and stomp my foot back to life, I did what anyone in survival mode would do. I decided to ignore it. This was my first unconscious wait-and-see health decision. Instead, I focused on trying to figure out what had happened the previous night. I had clocked out of my job as a waiter at a small Greek restaurant around 10 p.m., gotten into my old Toyota Camry hatchback, and proceeded to ingest 1/8 of an ounce of magic mushrooms before driving to my best friend's house. He was basically living on the beach in a garage which had become a safe haven for us to drink and smoke without any fear of punishment. As the night drew on, I had a stroke of genius, which included my driving to a local bar. When we arrived, my fake ID was promptly confiscated after the doorman asked me to spell my fake last name, and I answered incorrectly. In my embarrassment and for fear of repercussions, I wanted to quickly escape, and in doing so, I crashed my car into the side of the bar as I tried to maneuver out of the crowded parking lot. Then I crashed into another car parked on the opposite side. Finding myself wedged between the bar and a car posed a problem, remedied simply by hitting the gas with no regard for damage, something I was particularly adept at. Then things get a little murkier. I also remember somehow speeding down a dirt road on my old 10-speed Schwinn bicycle. Front tire sank into deep sand, launched over handlebars, resulting in solid faceplant. In the process of crashing my bike, I must have pinched a nerve, or it might have happened during the car accident, or maybe it was something I couldn't remember at all. I reached up, turned off the shower, and grabbed a towel. Hopefully, whatever it was would work itself out during the day. Then I went back to doing what I did best: avoiding. Yet, after a week, the sensation in my foot had not returned, and I was almost certain the numbness was gradually moving upward. When the numbness reached my thigh and I started having migraines, out of fear, I finally told my mother, who immediately got worried. That was the first time I understood that something could be seriously wrong, mostly because my mother was so shaken up. She quickly scheduled an MRI at Cape Cod Hospital, and when the test was over, we learned that I had lesions entwined around my spinal cord. My bicycle gymnastics and wild night had not been the culprits after all. Soon, the symptoms became debilitating, yet the cause remained a mystery. One day I woke up and could not walk at all, like an immediate onset of multiple sclerosis. Every week there was a new issue, a numbness or discomfort somewhere. My parents tried to keep their game face on as best they could, but I knew they were worried. We never talked about what we were all obviously afraid of, that I would become paralyzed or that the progression of whatever was happening would stop my heart. Or more simply put, that I would die. Every day for years there was a nagging voice in my head saying, "Jim, you're fucked. Tomorrow could be your last day." The tension and fear I felt was like living on a tightrope. So to survive my story of waiting to die, I hardened and turned off feeling. At the same time, we looked for a cure. My parents and I traveled all over the country looking for answers. I went for testing at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, and other leading institutions, trying to find the best doctors who could tell us what was wrong. The search took up so much time and effort that I had to take a medical leave from college. Dealing with my illness became a full-time job. As time passed and the doctors tried to figure out what was wrong with me, subsequent MRIs would show that the lesions on my spine continued to grow. Was it MS? Maybe Lyme disease? Neither fit the diagnosis, and typical treatments did not work. Each time we tried a new doctor, he would put me on different combinations of drugs. None had a positive effect. I started to lose function in my right leg, accompanied by more numbness and pain. Every night before bed, I prayed that when I woke up the next morning, everything would be fixed as quickly as it started. The pain and limp would be gone. But I never got my wish. Days, months, and then years passed, and my undiagnosed condition was labeled simply as chronic. More opinions proved fruitless, and treatments were benign attempts at best. Joint and muscle pain accompanied my lack of mobility and was soon followed by pressure in my chest, neurological complications, dizziness, uncontrolled bladder and bowels, and flu-like symptoms for stretches of months at a time. My overall balance was greatly impacted, and I developed a severe limp. I fell deeply into depression and developed a confused sense of self. I was no longer that rough-and-tumble athlete. In fact, there was no certainty as to what I would be capable of or if I would even live. My physical state became a new normal, and I went back to finish college and tried to pretend that nothing had happened. The way my friends looked at and treated me was perhaps harder than administering the IV medication I was sent back with, or trying to walk to class. So of course I got a motorcycle, despite not having any experience riding one or the license needed. It was an old royal blue Kawasaki KZ750. It was uninspected, unregistered, and had old plates and a loud smoky muffler. But this didn't stop me. I started driving, fast. I would park right next to the door of any building I was going to so that I wouldn't need to take one extra step and have to feel additional emotional or physical pain. One surgeon wanted to take a sample of the lesion on my spine to better diagnose my condition. But there was a catch. There was a 25% chance that I could be paralyzed as a result of the procedure. There was no way that the risk outweighed the rewards in my mind, because once they cut, you don't get it back. So I refused. Instead, we chose less invasive testing, which meant more spinal taps, not my favorite procedure. They performed so many spinal taps that scar tissue formed in my lower back at the insertion point, causing me even more spasticity and muscle pain. It took 3 full years to find a combination of drugs that seemed to stabilize my symptoms and slow their development. But I was still left with a limp, numbness, and muscle spasms that persist today. Worse, my self-confidence took a hit as a result of my health. Friends told me that I was becoming cynical, and one by one, they dropped out of my life. To the outside world, I maintained a positive frame of mind, but it came as a result of keeping myself in denial about my condition. For a long time, I honestly thought I was going to wake up and poof, my body would be miraculously healed. I was in survival mode, a state of mind that copes with what is and doesn't allow for what could be thinking. Before becoming ill, I operated with a cocky confidence in my physical ability, often to the hindrance of clear thought. That's a technical way of saying I was a little bit of, well, an asshole. It didn't matter what type of situation I got myself into, because I could muscle my way through or out of it with relative ease. Well, not anymore. I had to start thinking 3 steps ahead. I had to plan and navigate the world in a more careful way so I wouldn't stumble and fall. I started limiting my activity. I had to always know if there was seating wherever I was going or estimate how far I would have to limp to a table upon arriving at a restaurant. Were the restrooms difficult to get to? Would I have to deal with a crowd? The embarrassment of tripping and falling down in the dining room of crowded restaurants became a norm. My denial did not allow for me to carry a cane or drink any less. At the same time, I was feeling extremely vulnerable, so I put up a wall. I wasn't going to tell other people that I didn't feel well, or I couldn't control my bowels. Those kinds of things were not in my playbook at that time. And because they weren't in my playbook, I stayed ill. To some extent, I went out of my way to make myself worse because I started self-medicating with drugs and alcohol to avoid reality. I was angry and full of shame, and when people would ask what happened to me, I didn't want to get into it. So I created a story I could hide behind. A motorcycle accident was much easier to explain, and I thought it would bring less judgment than an undiagnosed illness. Whenever someone asked, "How are you?" my reply was always, "You can't hurt Superman." In reality, I felt hollow and totally alone. In late 1996, after a family intervention where my mother cried and begged me to focus on my health so that I could get better, and my father lectured me about the risk of the hallucinogens I was doing, I, under duress, took a leave from school and moved to New York City to live with my oldest sister and her family for a year. My parents thought that the move would be better for me. NYC was where the best hospitals were, and that's where I would have the best chance to be my healthiest. It was a bold move on their part. They were taking an action in what they thought was my best interest, despite their fear of disrupting my current life, including completing college. That year, my father sent me a Boston Globe article about a woman who had all of my symptoms yet somehow had the perseverance to explore more possibilities. This woman had found a physician, a true healer named Sam Donta, M.D., who combined a particular cocktail of drugs and counseling that changed her life. She began to recover in just months. Reading this woman's story was the first time I actually felt an emotion in over a year. It was hope creeping in. I could feel the burden lift a tiny bit. I could take a breath. Her story gave me the permission to keep searching for answers. Perhaps there was hope for me if I continued to work through this. I found Dr. Donta, motivated myself to get on his new patient list, made an appointment, and went to see him. When he told me he could help and that he believed I had Lyme disease, I had such an overwhelming sense of relief. Finally, someone understood me. It was like no feeling I had ever felt. My emotions rushed back in. I almost felt alive again, and for the first time in a long time, I began to cry. I mean the gut-wrenching, this has to come out, am I the one making those sounds crying? In the end, I did not have Lyme disease. Or maybe I did, who knows. But this was a turning point. Dr. Donta's ideas were innovative and scary. He told me clearly, "I want to insert a peripherally inserted central catheter known as a PICC line into your central nervous system, and you will deliver carefully dosed medications to yourself at home every day. There's a lot of maintenance. If the wound gets exposed, you could get a blood infection, and there is a chance of death. If you get air in the tube, you could develop an aneurysm and die.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?